What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. If you've been watching the channel over the past week, we've been looking at how teams have performed in one-score games and which teams were maybe better or worse than their record, which teams maybe were overrated or underrated this season. And now we're going to put it all into one big ranking. So we're going to put all the Power 5 teams and Notre Dame in here and see what the rankings would have looked like if these teams had split all of their one-score games. And this will be the last video we do until after Christmas, so hopefully you guys have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all of that. And again, I thank you for supporting the channel. It really means a lot. We've dedicated this channel to being just a college football channel really back this past summer, and it's been a nice steady growth, very consistent views, and I thank all of you for that. So let's get into it. We'll start at the top, Georgia. And so the way I did tiebreakers here is, so Michigan, Ohio State, they both would have been 11-1 if they had split their one-score games. Of course, Ohio State didn't have any. And again, we went through all the Power 5 conferences. If you want to look at this more in depth and you can see what the records would have looked like in each conference, go back and watch those videos. But if there was a tie, so Michigan, Ohio State, both 11-1, then we're going to go with what the actual record was. And that's what you're going to see in parentheses. And so that's why I have Michigan at 2, Ohio State at 3. But Georgia would have been clearly the best team, 11.5 wins for them. Only had the one-score game, and they won it. So you split that, and again, you get 11.5 and 0.5. Michigan and Ohio State there at 11-1. These are your top 3 teams. And kind of a clear-cut top 3. And we'll see if it plays out this way in the playoff. Do we see a close game between Georgia and Ohio State, and then Michigan blow out TCU? If that's the case, then I think you can learn a lot from these rankings. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but again, these were the three clear-cut teams. And also, you have to look at a lot of other things. You have to look at the schedules and things like that. But this is just simply based off of the records. So there is TCU at number 4, but you see a pretty good drop for them. So those 2 and 3 teams were at 11-1. TCU 9.5 and 2.5. So a big drop for them. It's from those top 3 teams down to these teams. USC also 9.5 wins. Alabama, Penn State 9.5 wins. And there's Illinois. Illinois would be at 9.5 and 2.5 in the top 8. Based off of, again, just them splitting their one-score games, Illinois would have been a top 10 team. And they were very close to doing that, very close to beating Michigan. And I said this before, Illinois really was the best team in the Big Ten West this season. And again, there's Penn State, Alabama, USC, TCU. Based off of these numbers, any of these teams could have made a case if they had split their one-score games to possibly get into the college football playoff. These are really, this is that next tier behind those top 3 teams. And then we had Clemson and Washington both tied at 9. Both teams were 9-3 if they split one-score games, and 10-2 in real life. So those are your final teams in the top 10. Let's move on. We had 5 teams tied at number 11, Kansas State, Oregon, Texas, UCLA, and Utah. This is fairly close to where these teams wound up in the rankings. Texas was only 8-4, so they were a little bit lower, but 9-3 if they split their one-score games, and these teams are all 9-3 in real life as well. So interesting there, and I think Texas was actually 8-4, so I may have made a typo there. But still, they would have been at 9-3 if they split their one-score games. So Texas actually would have been just behind those teams at number 15. Tennessee 8. So Tennessee finished in the top 10, but look at where they would have been if they split their one-score games. They would have been all the way down at number 16 at 8.5 and 4.5. Florida State right there behind them at 17, same as LSU. And then you had Oregon State also at 8.5 and 4.5, and then Duke at number 20. So Duke comes in at number 20, 8.5 and 4.5. They were 8-4, and remember, all of their losses were one-score games, so they were not that far away from being a 10-2 type team. Let's move on now to 21 through 24. Pittsburgh at 21, a team that was not ranked. Wake Forest was not ranked at the end of the season. Oklahoma was not ranked. So these are all teams that maybe were better than you think. And we'll see if that plays out in the bowl games. Of course, you have all the opt-outs and everything, so we can't read too much into that. But Minnesota right there at number 24, and then Ole Miss also tied at number 24. Moving on to 26 through 29, Iowa, Louisville, and Arkansas tied at number 28. Arkansas is a team that I think was better than their record. North Carolina was worse than their record. Again, if they split their one-score games, would have just been 7-5, and they wound up at 9-3. Then we go to number 30, Mississippi State, Notre Dame, South Carolina. All of these teams 7-5, and they were 8-4 in real life, but 7-5 if they had split their one-score games. Moving on to 33, we had Kentucky, Oklahoma State, Washington State, all tied at 7-5, and they were 7-5 in real life. So these teams were what the record said. I mean, they were who we thought they were. All coming in here again at number 33. 37 through 40, Purdue, a little bit overrated. They would have just had 6.5 wins. Same thing for NC State, Syracuse. Baylor would have been a little better than their record at 6.5 wins, and Maryland also at 6.5 wins. And I think Maryland was 7-5, so I think I made a couple of errors here. I think what I did was I started off doing something different in the parentheses, and then I later decided to just put the actual record there, and so that may be why I messed up on Texas and Maryland. Hopefully we didn't mess anybody else up, but there, again, Baylor and Maryland at number 40. 42, Texas A&M. Better than their record would suggest. Iowa State, better than that 4-8 record. They would have actually had 6.5 wins. Florida was like the most mediocre team in college football. They were 6-6. They were the only team that would still be 6-6 if they split their one-score games. They were 3-3 in one-possession games. So again, Florida was the definition of mediocre this season. They were right in the middle. And then you had Cal. They would have had a much better season if they had split their one-score games. And Texas Tech would have dropped off a good bit, all the way from 7-5 down to 5-7. Maybe they were not as good as their record would suggest. Maybe the Red Raiders a little bit overrated. 47 through 49, you'd have Kansas, Wisconsin, Auburn, and Miami. All of these teams would have been 5-7 if they split their one-score games. And then 51 through 53, Nebraska, Virginia Tech. There's Vanderbilt and West Virginia. And then you've got Nebraska, and must have made another error here. We've got Nebraska twice. Sorry, I'm bouncing back here. So we had Nebraska, Virginia Tech, Vanderbilt, and then West Virginia. And for whatever reason, I put these teams on a slide again. But Virginia would have been right there behind them, 4.5 and 7.5. And what I did was I just kind of split their final two games because they didn't get to play the last two games. And that's how we came up with that 4.5 win total. All right, moving on to 56 through 59. Arizona, they would have been a little worse than the record suggests. Michigan State also would have been worse. Georgia Tech would have been worse, only 3.5 wins. Indiana and Rutgers also at 3.5 wins. And then we've got our bottom teams. This is it. This is the very bottom of college football. Arizona State, Boston College, Stanford, Northwestern, and Colorado. Northwestern actually would have been a little bit better. They would have been 3-9. They were 1-11 in real life. But Colorado, clearly the worst team in the country. Even if they split their one-score games, they still finished 1-11. And then you had Stanford, Boston College, Arizona State. Those teams all had rough seasons as well. And the record didn't change if you split their one-possession games. So interesting rankings here. Just something that I thought we'd take a look at. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this information. Does it really mean a whole lot? Well, that means a little bit. I think you can take some away from this, but I don't think it tells the whole story. Again, give me your thoughts on all of this down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.